There comes a moment in life when you look around at everything you worked so hard to create and realize that something has changed. The house may still be standing, the career may still be there, the relationships may still look familiar, the routine may still be exactly what it was yesterday, but somehow, you no longer feel at home inside the life you built. And perhaps the hardest part is that nothing appears obviously wrong. There is no dramatic failure, no single event you can point to and say, that is when everything changed. Instead, there is simply a quiet feeling growing inside you, a sense that the person you have become no longer fits comfortably inside the life you once designed. That feeling can be confusing because you remember how badly you wanted this life. You remember the sacrifices. You remember the long nights, the difficult decisions, the opportunities you turned down, and the moments when you told yourself, one day, all of this will be worth it. And maybe it was worth it. Maybe that life gave you stability, experience, confidence, and lessons you could never have learned any other way. But the fact that something was right for you once does not mean it has to remain right forever. We often make the mistake of believing that growth should make us more comfortable with the life we've built. But sometimes growth does the opposite. It makes you question things you once accepted without hesitation. You begin to notice how much of your life was shaped by expectations. You begin to ask whether the goals you are pursuing are actually yours. You start wondering whether you're working toward fulfillment or simply maintaining an identity that other people have grown accustomed to seeing. And that can be frightening, because familiarity has a powerful voice. It tells you to stay where you are because at least you know what to expect. Fear whispers, what if you leave and regret it? Doubt says, maybe you're just being ungrateful. And the people around you may look at everything you have accomplished and ask, why would you want to change anything? But wanting something different does not automatically mean you are ungrateful for what you have. You can appreciate your past and still desire a different future. You can be proud of what you built and still recognize that you have outgrown it. You can love the person you were without asking that person to control who you become. Sometimes the life you built was exactly what you needed for one season. It gave you structure when you needed structure. It gave you security when you needed security. It helped you become stronger when you were still learning who you were. But seasons change, priorities evolve, your understanding of yourself deepens. And perhaps that is why the discomfort is there. Not to punish you, but to get your attention. Maybe that restlessness is telling you that there is more to discover. Maybe that dissatisfaction is asking you to stop living on autopilot. Maybe that quiet voice inside you is saying, you have spent enough time becoming who everyone expected you to be. Now it is time to discover who you actually are. You don't have to destroy everything overnight. You don't have to walk away from every responsibility. You simply have to become honest enough to admit that something inside you has changed. Because the question is no longer, how do I keep this life exactly as it is? The deeper question is, what kind of life can grow with the person I am becoming? One of the hardest things to recognize is that familiarity is not the same thing as purpose. We can become so accustomed to a certain routine, a certain career, a certain relationship, or a certain way of living that we stop questioning whether it still has meaning for us. We wake up, go to work, take care of responsibilities, pay the bills, answer the messages, meet expectations, and repeat the same pattern the next day. From the outside, everything may look perfectly fine, but somewhere inside, a quiet question begins to appear. Is this really the life I want? That question can be uncomfortable, because the familiar feels safe. Even when something no longer makes us happy, we know how to function inside it. We know what tomorrow looks like. We know what people expect from us. We know how to play our role. And sometimes, the fear of the unknown becomes stronger than the desire for something better. But there is a difference between being comfortable and being fulfilled. Comfort tells you that nothing needs to change because everything is familiar. Purpose asks whether what you're doing actually matters to you. Comfort wants certainty. Purpose often requires courage. You can become incredibly successful at living a life that was never truly yours. You can earn money, receive recognition, build a reputation, and accomplish goals while still feeling a strange emptiness when the applause disappears. That emptiness doesn't necessarily mean you failed. Sometimes it means your definition of success has changed. Perhaps when you were younger, success meant proving yourself. You wanted people to see that you were capable. You wanted security. You wanted recognition. You wanted to reach a certain position because you believed that achievement would finally make you feel complete. But as you mature, your priorities may shift. You may begin valuing freedom more than status, peace more than recognition, meaningful relationships more than possessions, and purpose more than applause. And that's when familiarity can become dangerous. Not because familiar things are always bad, but because they can prevent you from noticing that you've changed. You may stay in a job because you've already invested years into it. You may remain in a routine because changing it would inconvenience other people. You may continue chasing a goal because admitting that you no longer want it feels like admitting defeat. But sometimes the greater defeat is spending another decade pursuing something your heart has already outgrown. You have to give yourself permission to ask difficult questions. Why am I doing this? Who am I trying to impress? What would I choose if I wasn't afraid of disappointing anyone? What parts of my life give me energy? And what parts constantly drain me? What am I continuing simply because I started it years ago? These questions aren't signs of weakness. They're signs of awareness. Purpose doesn't always arrive as one dramatic revelation. Sometimes it emerges slowly when you begin paying attention to what consistently matters to you. It may be hidden in the work that makes you lose track of time, the people who bring out your best qualities, the problems you genuinely care about solving, or the contribution you want to make beyond yourself. The world will always offer you definitions of success. It will tell you what to chase, what to own, what to become, and what should make you proud. But eventually, you have to decide whether those definitions actually belong to you. Because a familiar life can keep you busy for years, while a purposeful life asks you to be awake inside it. There is a point in life when you realize that the person you have been presenting to the world is no longer the person you are becoming. Maybe people still see you as the dependable one, the successful one, the strong one, or the person who always knows what to do. They remember who you were 5 or 10 years ago, and without even realizing it, they expect you to remain that person forever. But life does not work that way. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to discover new values, new dreams, and new priorities. You are allowed to outgrow an identity that once felt completely natural. The difficulty is that identities can become powerful. Once people attach a label to you, you may begin protecting it even when it no longer serves you. If everyone knows you as the person who never quits, you may stay in situations that should have ended long ago, simply because leaving feels like failure. If everyone sees you as successful, you may continue pursuing achievements that no longer make you happy, because you are afraid of what people will think. If you're known as the strong one, you may hide your struggles because you don't want anyone to see you differently. But strength is not pretending that nothing has changed. Strength is having the honesty to acknowledge when something inside you has changed. You don't have to remain loyal to an outdated version of yourself simply because other people became comfortable with it. The person you were had different information. They had different experiences. They had different fears and different dreams. They made decisions based on what they understood at that time, and you should respect that person rather than criticize them. Maybe you once believed that money was the most important measure of success. Now you care more about time and freedom. Maybe you once chased approval from everyone around you. Now you understand that peace is more valuable than applause. Maybe you once believed that being busy meant being important. Now you realize that being present with the people you love may matter far more. That is not inconsistency. That is development. Sometimes people will notice your transformation before you fully understand it yourself. They may say, "You've changed." And instead of becoming defensive, you can recognize that they are right. You have changed. The question is whether you have changed intentionally or whether you have simply allowed circumstances to change you. Growing into a new identity requires courage, because you may have to disappoint people who benefited from your old identity. Someone may prefer the version of you who always said yes. Someone may be uncomfortable with your new boundaries. Someone may question why you no longer want the same things. And sometimes the hardest part is realizing that certain relationships were built around who you used to be. But you cannot spend your entire life protecting other people's expectations of you. Your responsibility is not to remain predictable. Your responsibility is to remain honest with yourself. You are not a finished product. You are a human being in motion. Every experience teaches you something. Every mistake adds perspective. Every difficult season reveals another part of your character. And every time you choose growth over comfort, you become a little more aware of who you really are. So when the old identity begins to feel too tight, don't immediately assume something is wrong. Maybe you're simply growing beyond the boundaries you once accepted. Maybe the version of you that once helped you survive is no longer the version you need to thrive. And maybe the next stage of your life requires you to stop asking, "Who do they expect me to be?" and start asking, "Who am I ready to become?" When you realize that your life no longer feels right, one of the first instincts can be to change everything. You start thinking about quitting your job, leaving your city, ending relationships, abandoning old routines, and starting over somewhere nobody knows your name. There is something attractive about the idea of a complete reset. It feels clean. It feels powerful. It feels like if you could just walk away from everything familiar, you could finally become the person you want to be. But sometimes the desire for a completely new life comes from frustration rather than wisdom. Not everything needs to be destroyed simply because something needs to change. The life you built may contain parts that are still valuable. There may be relationships worth repairing, skills worth developing, responsibilities worth honoring, and dreams worth reconsidering. The problem may not be the entire structure. Perhaps one part of it has become outdated. Perhaps your career needs a new direction rather than an immediate ending. Perhaps your relationship needs honest communication rather than an automatic goodbye. Perhaps your routine needs more balance rather than complete abandonment. This is where maturity becomes important. Anyone can react emotionally to discomfort. It takes greater strength to pause and understand it. Before making a dramatic decision, ask yourself what is actually causing the pain. Is it the environment, or is it the way you're approaching it? Is the job truly wrong for you, or are you exhausted because you haven't created any boundaries? Is the relationship broken beyond repair, or have you stopped communicating honestly? Are you unhappy with your life, or are you simply comparing it to an unrealistic picture of someone else's life? These questions don't always produce easy answers, but they can prevent you from making permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. Change doesn't always have to be dramatic. Sometimes it begins with something very small. You start waking up earlier. You stop answering every demand immediately. You spend time doing something meaningful again. You have a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. You learn a new skill. You say no without feeling guilty. You create space to think. Those small decisions can eventually transform the structure of your life without requiring you to burn everything down. There is also wisdom in recognizing what should remain. Maybe your family matters deeply to you. Maybe certain friendships have carried you through difficult seasons. Maybe your work gives you stability while you explore another direction. Maybe your home represents years of effort and sacrifice. Growth doesn't require you to reject everything from your past. Sometimes growth means taking the best parts of your past with you, while leaving behind what no longer belongs. We often believe transformation has to look dramatic from the outside, but some of the most important changes happen quietly. Nobody sees the moment you decide to stop seeking approval. Nobody applauds when you establish a boundary. Nobody gives you a medal when you choose patience instead of anger. Yet those decisions can completely change the person you become. You don't need to prove that you're changing by destroying everything familiar. You only need to become more intentional about what you keep, what you change, and what you release. A new chapter doesn't always require a new life. Sometimes it requires a new perspective on the life already in front of you. The goal isn't to escape everything that came before. The goal is to understand what that previous chapter taught you, recognize what no longer serves you, and make deliberate choices about what deserves to come with you into the future. Beginning again can be one of the most difficult decisions a person ever makes, especially when you have already spent years building a life. There is a strange pressure that comes with having invested so much time, energy, money, and emotion into something. You start believing that because you have come this far, you have to keep going. You tell yourself that changing direction would mean admitting that you were wrong. But life is not a contract that requires you to remain committed to every decision you made in the past. Sometimes beginning again is not a sign that you failed. Sometimes it is proof that you finally understand yourself better. We often admire people who appear certain about their path. We see someone who has built a successful career, established a family, created a business, or achieved recognition, and we assume they always knew where they were going. But most lives are not built according to a perfect plan. They are built through trial and error, unexpected opportunities, difficult lessons, wrong turns, and moments when circumstances force us to reconsider what we thought we wanted. There may come a time when you realize that the goal you once chased no longer excites you. The career you once dreamed about may feel empty. The lifestyle you worked so hard to create may no longer match your values. And when that realization comes, you may feel embarrassed. You may think about all the years you invested and wonder whether you wasted them. But your past is not wasted simply because your future is different. Every chapter teaches you something. The job you no longer want may have taught you discipline. The relationship that ended may have taught you what love and respect should look like. The mistakes you made may have given you wisdom that success alone could never provide. Even the seasons you now wish you could erase may have developed qualities you will need in the next chapter. Beginning again doesn't mean starting from zero. You are starting from experience. That distinction matters. When you begin again at 20, you have one kind of understanding. When you begin again later in life, you carry years of lessons with you. You know more about your strengths. You understand your weaknesses. You recognize what drains you and what gives you energy. You have learned which battles are worth fighting and which ones aren't. The fear of starting over often comes from imagining that you have to know exactly what happens next. But you don't. You don't need a 10-year plan before taking the first honest step. You don't need everyone to approve of your decision. You don't need certainty before you begin. You need courage. Courage doesn't mean you aren't afraid. It means fear doesn't get to make every decision for you. Maybe beginning again means learning something new. Maybe it means changing your priorities. Maybe it means rebuilding your confidence after years of putting yourself last. Maybe it means finally pursuing something you postponed because you were waiting for the perfect moment. There will never be a perfect moment. There will only be the moment when you decide that continuing to live against yourself is more painful than facing the uncertainty of change. And when that moment comes, you don't have to apologize for choosing growth. You don't have to explain every decision to everyone. You don't have to prove that your new direction will work before you take the first step. Sometimes you simply have to trust that the wisdom you gained from your previous chapter is enough to help you begin writing the next one. At some point in life, You have to stop and ask yourself a question that is both simple and difficult. What does a good life actually mean to me? Not what does success look like on social media. Not what would impress my neighbors. Not what would make my family proud. Not what would convince strangers that I have made it. What does a meaningful life mean to me when nobody is watching and there is nothing left to prove? That question matters because it is surprisingly easy to build a life around other people's expectations. From an early age, we receive messages about what we should become: get good grades, find a respectable career, make money, buy a house, build a reputation, be successful. And there is nothing wrong with ambition. The problem begins when you spend so much time meeting expectations that you forget to discover your own. You can spend years climbing a ladder only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. Maybe you chose a career because it offered status, even though you never felt connected to the work. Maybe you pursued money because you believed financial success would finally make you feel secure. Maybe you stayed busy because being busy made you feel important. Maybe you constantly compared your progress to other people and began measuring your worth through achievements that didn't actually matter to you. Eventually, something inside you begins to resist. You start realizing that success without meaning can become another form of exhaustion. You can have a comfortable life and still feel restless. You can have recognition and still feel unseen. You can have everything people told you to want and still wonder why you don't feel fulfilled. This is why your values matter. Your values are the principles that tell you what deserves your time, energy, attention, and commitment. They might include family, freedom, integrity, creativity, service, learning, faith, peace, courage, or contribution. The specific values are different for every person. What matters is that they belong to you. When your daily decisions align with your values, life begins to feel more authentic. The challenges don't necessarily disappear, but they become easier to understand because you know why you're facing them. But when you constantly live against your values, even success can feel strangely empty. Imagine spending your entire life working toward financial freedom while sacrificing every meaningful relationship along the way. Imagine building an impressive career while destroying your health and peace of mind. Imagine becoming admired by thousands of people while becoming a stranger to yourself. That's not the kind of success worth chasing. You have to define success for yourself. Maybe success means having enough money to control your time. Maybe it means being present for your children. Maybe it means creating something that helps other people. Maybe it means having the freedom to wake up and decide how you want to spend your day. Maybe it means living with integrity, even when nobody rewards you for it. There is no universal scoreboard for a meaningful life, and once you understand that, comparison begins to lose its power. You stop asking, why am I not where they are? You start asking, am I becoming who I want to be? That is a much more important question, because the goal isn't to construct a life that looks impressive from the outside. The goal is to construct a life that feels honest from the inside. And sometimes that means making choices that other people don't understand. It may mean earning less but having more freedom. It may mean choosing family over status. It may mean leaving behind an environment where you are praised but no longer growing. Your life belongs to you. Other people can offer advice. They can express opinions. They can tell you what they would do. But they cannot live your consequences, carry your regrets, or experience your fulfillment. So eventually, you have to take responsibility for defining your own version of enough. You have to decide what deserves your energy, what deserves your attention, and what you are no longer willing to sacrifice just to maintain an image of success. Because when your choices begin reflecting your deepest values, you stop building a life for an audience and start building one that actually belongs to you. There comes a moment when you realize that the problem was never simply the job, the house, the city, the relationship, or the routine. The deeper problem was that somewhere along the way, you became disconnected from yourself. You became so focused on building a successful life that you forgot to ask whether you were still present inside it. You learned how to meet expectations, solve problems, carry responsibilities, and keep moving forward. But somewhere beneath all of that achievement was a quieter question. What happened to me? This question can be difficult because the outside world may see nothing wrong. People may look at your accomplishments and assume you are happy. They may see the career, the possessions, the relationships, and the reputation you built and wonder why you would ever feel dissatisfied. But fulfillment cannot always be measured from the outside. A life can look complete while the person living it feels incomplete. Sometimes we spend years becoming what we believe we are supposed to become. We become responsible because people need us to be responsible. We become successful because we want to prove that we are capable. We become strong because we learn that nobody is coming to rescue us. We become agreeable because we want to avoid disappointing people. And eventually, those survival strategies can become identities. Then one day, you realize you don't know what you want anymore. You know what everyone else wants from you. You know what your family expects. You know what your employer needs. You know what society considers successful. But when you ask yourself what you want, the answer is unclear. That is not necessarily a crisis. It can be an awakening. Sometimes losing connection with your old life is what forces you to reconnect with yourself. The discomfort becomes a signal that you can no longer continue living entirely according to old expectations. Maybe there are dreams you abandoned because they seemed unrealistic. Maybe there are interests you stopped pursuing because they didn't seem productive. Maybe there are parts of your personality you buried because they didn't fit the image you were trying to maintain. Coming home to yourself means giving those parts of you permission to speak again. It means remembering what made you curious before you became obsessed with being successful. It means remembering what brought you joy before you started measuring everything by productivity. It means remembering the principles you believed in before fear and pressure convinced you to compromise them. This doesn't mean returning to your younger self exactly as you were. You have changed too much for that. Instead, it means taking the wisdom you have gained and reconnecting it with the parts of yourself that still matter. You don't need to become somebody else to build a meaningful future. You need to become more honest about who you are. That honesty may require difficult choices. You may have to disappoint people. You may have to admit that something you once wanted is no longer your dream. You may have to establish boundaries with people who became accustomed to having unlimited access to your time and energy. You may have to walk away from environments that reward an identity you no longer want to carry. But you don't have to explain your entire transformation to everyone. Some people will understand, some won't, and that's okay. Your responsibility is not to make every person comfortable with your growth. Your responsibility is to live with integrity. When you begin listening to yourself again, you may discover that the next chapter doesn't require you to become extraordinary. It requires you to become present. Present with the people you love. Present with your choices. Present with your values. Present with the life unfolding in front of you. You may discover that what you were searching for wasn't another achievement at all. Maybe you were searching for permission to stop performing and start living. And perhaps the most important realization is that you are not starting from nothing. Everything you have experienced has shaped you. Every mistake taught you something. Every difficult season revealed strength. Every wrong turn gave you information about the road you truly want to travel. So you can carry the lessons forward without carrying every old identity with you. You can honor where you came from without allowing it to decide where you are going. You can appreciate the life you built while still making room for the life that now feels more authentic. The next chapter begins when you stop asking who you are supposed to be and start listening carefully enough to recognize who you have been becoming all along.